Massive bipedal footprints discovered on the Pacific Ocean floor over 2.4 miles deep. Back in 2018, students of the National Oceanography Center of Southampton, Britain, would make an absolutely amazing discovery. Measuring at just under 7 feet in length and leaving over 13-inch deep impressions, they would discover the largest footprints ever found. And they didn't just find a couple, they used a robot to locate over 3,500. And these 3,500 footprints would span between Mexico and Hawaii. Currently, the only creature that inhabits the ocean that can leave an imprint that size is the humpback whale. And it is said that humpback whales will leave impressions on the ocean floor with their tail, but only in shallow waters. Researchers say that though it is not likely, the only way to find out is to tag them and watch their behavior for a couple years. So I'm just going to go ahead and say what everybody's thinking. Could these be massive giant footprints thousands of years old? Because if that's the case, that would mean at one time the oceans were much more shallow than they are now. The university stated they had much more research to do before they could come to any conclusions. So in the book of Enoch in chapter 7, it states that the fallen came down and bred with the daughters of men. They took unto themselves wives and chose one for each himself. And they three became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells. Now if you don't know what ell means, elbow to hand. That's a unit of measure they used back then. In certain societies, the length an ell represented differed, ranging from what is commonly known as 18 inches. But as I looked it up, the average from the French to the Scottish was well over 2 feet. The Scottish, 54 inches was an ell. So I've been looking into Norse and Greek mythology, and they talk about Zeus, the son of Cronus. Cronus was a titan, and he ate all of his children in fear that they would overthrow his throne. Cronus' wife, Rhea, grew angry over this, so she decided to take one of his sons and hide him. His name was Zeus, and he was hid and raised on Crete Island. So a while back, I remember doing a video on Crete Island and how there was a lot of giants' remains found there. The remains found ranged anywhere from 40 feet up to 72 feet in length. And I also read that there was a lot of giant activity around Sardinia, so I began looking on Google Earth to check it out. Crete Island, Sardinia. And here's what I found on the ocean floor next to Sardinia. All of these, what look like footsteps. I'm saying if you took a regular person and told them to take steps and multiple steps on the beach in clay or sand and then mimic them, these will line up pretty close to the same steps and foot patterns as what a human would lay. So I humored the idea and thought, well, maybe it was a giant. And here's what I found. Upon zooming in and using the measurement tool on Google Earth, one of those footsteps was 4,625 feet. There's more. And these footprints appeared all over, up the coast of Africa, all through the Mediterranean. You could find these footprints. And what's more amazing, I found some that strided out. Stride 10.4 miles. So I guess what I'm saying is, could these footprints have been left by a titan? Possibly even Cronus. And my boy Mini Minuteman, who criticized me about finding footprints on the ocean floor 2.1 miles deep, no, he didn't need a snorkel. He was over 2 miles tall. And his feet print, much larger than 7 feet. The stories of the Titans, I believe, is true, and they were massive beyond belief. Poseidon, said to be a giant god of the sea. Could they be his feet print? God of the sea, he could travel through all the oceans without even having to go underwater. Now I know that sounds crazy, but it did say in the book of Enoch 3,000 ells. When doing the math, that ranged from the smallest 4,500 feet to up to 12,500 feet. This mural depicting a giant carrying 2 elephants was found in one of the pyramids of Nubia, sometimes referred to as the pyramids of Meroe. Meroe is the historical capital of the kingdom of Kush. This is where the antique mural of the giant was found, in the burial chambers in one of these pyramids. This set of 50 sandstone and red brick pyramids are marvels of ancient architecture. The remnants of an ancient civilization dating back to 2500 BC. A civilization that once thrived in the backyard of modern-day Sudan. The adornments and cuneiform writing all throughout these structures show of a people that had a historical global reach. But this old fresco depicting a giant of colossal dimensions carrying 2 elephants has specialists buzzing. Theorists claim that this is without a doubt proof that red and white giants once roamed this earth. Could he be the last of an ancient Atlantean civilization that averaged 15 feet tall? What do you think? Comment below. So before I continue, smash that like button, hit the bell, and subscribe to my page for more content like this. I know some of the stuff I post can seem far-fetched, but rather than disregard these people that are telling these stories in ancient times as total quacks, why not take them seriously? Why not legitimize them? This is how they knew how to relay what they experienced. Today, if there was a flood, everything would be gone. Everything. Record of everything we have. But what would be left? Certain people that lived, that told the legacy on. Through story, around campfires, they would tell these stories of great titans and gods that roamed Earth. They could simply be higher beings, extraterrestrials, or they could be divine, or both. But I think as mankind, we need to stop putting limits on what is possible in this world. The simple notion that Gaia, Mother Nature, creator of all, is a living, breathing organism in itself is absolutely fantastical. Yes, our planet has a consciousness. Our planet is alive. It is a living organism. And when you abuse her and when you treat her like crap, she will fight back. She will preserve her survival. And so will the higher beings. The giants, they were abominations. They were evil. And the sin on earth was great at these times. The fallen, the watchers, the Anunnaki, much sin, much evil. And that's kind of the way it's going at the moment. She even creates her own organic supercomputer that creates life and influences life, opens the 7 chakras, while the evil side send in the same stuff, but it only opens 3 chakras: head, life, and sexual chakra, instead of all 7. That's why society is going the way it is. Back in Atlantean times, the Atlanteans were persuaded with technology and convinced by evil extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki and the gray aliens. They were convinced to open a portal. And when they opened the Stargate in the universe, the Anunnaki and the Greys sent in meteors. They were full of the evil black goo and black stones. These evil black stones convince people and sway them towards the evil. That's why it's only 3 chakras: head, life, and sexual chakra. They lose the heart chakra, empathy. And if there's ever been a time where there was lack of empathy, it's now. The story goes in World War II that a German SS soldier went into a mine shaft and he found these black rocks. They would later find out they were meteorites. He took them back to base where a certain leader came into contact with him, lost all empathy, and wiped out an entire civilization of people. This stuff is real, people. It is here. So open your hearts. This is the story of how an ancient civilization once defeated the reptilians in battle. In the 20th century, a member of the Tangri race of aliens was asked by a human leader if humans ever stood a fighting chance at defeating the reptilians. To which he replied, "Your ancestors from ancient Slavia once defeated them with nothing but stones and sticks. Since then you have advanced and learned much, but you have lost your courage." In 856 BC, what is near now Admurtia, Russia, there was a confrontation between humans and reptoids. The account states that the reptilians were building an underground base. A witness of the event at the time wrote, "Thunder by day, lightning by night. The earth shakes like the days of old again. The snakes are everywhere, flying low and causing all to die. The rivers and lakes are dry. We must fight or we will die." The humans would end up winning this battle against the reptilians, but it is said they did not act alone. According to evidence, they had help from an alien race behind the scenes. They gave them super advanced tech so they could actually keep up with the reptilians. But in the actual moment of battle, there were no aliens on the battlefield. It was humans only. This showed that we are actually capable of defeating them, and nothing is lost yet. These ancient humans would make the works of art you've seen behind me throughout this entire segment. They did this as a reminder of the day they defeated the lizard men. But there is one little X factor. This culture would end up disappearing off the face of the earth almost 200 years later. On June 30th, 1908, an incident known as the Tunguska event took place in Siberia. The explosion flattened over 500,000 acres and covered 2,150 square kilometers. At the time, scientists concluded that an asteroid exploded 3 to 6 miles above the Earth. This Tangri member said different. It was actually an alien battle. For 5 days and 4 nights, the Mater had been fighting the Dorsey. The bout was getting serious. The Council of Five even became concerned. On the day of the explosion, an Almanuk ship came into the atmosphere. They had heard about the battle impending. They are wise and respected wherever they go. so they thought they could de-escalate the fighting. They arrived with their largest Pleiadian ship, but unfortunately the reptilians had warned the Mater they were coming. The Mater had just shot down the last Dorsey ship, so they made their way through the atmosphere and waited. As soon as the Alma Nook entered the atmosphere that day, they were attacked by 3 Mater ships. Having the upper hand, they defeated the Alma Nook, causing their ship to explode. This was the actual cause of the Tunguska event. Now this is the second theory I've heard explaining what took place in Siberia on that day. The other was that Nikola Tesla was testing a direct energy weapon. So recently, one of my followers sent me a message and he had a very interesting story. He was just 14 years old as he was growing up in California. He grew up troubled and would eventually get involved in a gang. This would of course lead to gang violence that would soon spill over to his mother's home. So his mom, who worked 3 jobs, had had enough. She had to do something. She decided it would be good for him to learn a little bit about his heritage from Mexico. He would end up going to visit with his grandfather on his father's side. Little did he know, it would change his life. It just so happens that his grandfather lived near the 7 luminaries of Mexico. For those of you that don't know, the 7 luminaries of Mexico are large craters. These craters have been around for generations, and oddly enough, they perfectly mirror the Big Dipper. So many suspect they were actually created by extraterrestrial craft from ETs that hailed from the Big Dipper. And the stories surrounding these craters would say the same thing. He stated that while he was there, you could see UFOs every night. Not only that, you could hear things going on underground. His grandfather would tell him stories passed down from generation to generation. Some of them he even got to witness, like the fact that the craters can grow massive crops. It's rumored they can grow mangoes the size of basketballs, heads of lettuce a meter tall. His grandfather would tell him that the ancient higher beings would come down and see his ancestors. Sometimes they would come from the skies, sometimes they would come from underground. But a certain group in particular would tell them that they could solve world hunger. And they would go on to show them how. The secret is sacred and it truly has not been shared. But it's said they taught them how to use the energy from the craters. Years ago, the government would catch wind of it, so they would send officials out. But the locals were reluctant to share their secrets. So the government officials would end up calling it a hoax. But trust me, it is no hoax, and the stories will blow your mind. The one that moved me the most will challenge everything you've ever learned about the Aztec, Incan, and Mayan civilizations. His grandfather would explain that it all started when a group of Spanish explorers would land on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. The group would drop anchor and make their way to shore. When they first landed on the beach, they were greeted by a small fishing tribe that lived nearby. The Spanish sailors were in rough shape. They were starving and dehydrated. While the crew neared death, the only one that was in good health was the priest. As back then, they always took care of the priest before anybody. So while his men had one foot in the grave, he was in perfectly fine shape. The villagers would notice their condition and offer them help. Not only would they give them food and water, but they would heal them in a matter of minutes using an ancient technique learned from the higher beings. They would then take them to their village, which would be a mistake. Upon arrival, the crew was speechless. There was gold everywhere. Literally every building was covered. They had more gold than any of the men had ever laid their eyes on. Not only that, they seemed to have acquired technology. Tech acquired from the sky people. When asked where it came from, they pointed to the sky. The priest seemed unimpressed. Here y'all. Early wartime submarines and their alleged encounters with monsters of the sea. It would start back in 1915 with Captain Schmidt's German U-boat number 28. As they were making their way through turbulent waters, they would encounter a British steam freighter head-on. This freighter happened to be carrying a nice payload of British military equipment, from vehicles to artillery. So without hesitation, they fire on the ship, sinking it and its 61 crew members within 30 seconds. As the ship submerged, a large explosion happened while underwater. This would cause much debris and shrapnel to land on the German U-boat. To their surprise, as the Germans were trying to dodge the debris, something emerged from around the explosion. It was a massive sea monster with a triangle-shaped head, large teeth, and webbed feet. It would screech in pain and terrorize the U-boat for a short period of time, but before long it would die from its wounds, sinking to the bottom with the shrapnel. Next, we have the alleged encounter of German U-boat number 85. In 2016, when a group of engineers was laying electrical lines at the bottom of the Irish Sea, they discovered the remains of a World War I U-boat. Known for its alleged encounter, it was German U-boat 85. Their account would take place on April 30th, 1918. Captain and crew would be making their way through the Irish Sea looking for British enemies, when suddenly out of nowhere something would collide with the side of their sub. The loud bang and rattling would shake the entire crew, some of them even losing their footing. After making sure they didn't sustain any real damage, the captain would continue on high alert. There were no more occurrences for several minutes, when suddenly out of nowhere he would notice a large looming figure obscuring their path. Thinking it was a possible enemy, he would approach and lock on. This is when he would realize it was definitely no enemy sub. He would explain that you could see the creature's teeth glistening in the moonlight. The British ship HM Coreopsis was on patrol in the Irish Sea when they noticed a large German U-boat. Thinking it was odd that they didn't submerge, they realized it couldn't. As they prepared to fire, they noticed its dilapidated condition and the crew surrendering. The German crew couldn't get on the ship fast enough. Upon surrender, Captain Crack would tell their story. As they approached the looming figure in the sea, it would suddenly disappear in the depths as fast as they saw it. It would approach from the depths as if predator and prey, sinking its large teeth into the hull of the sub, delivering a bite that would pierce the steel. They would have to surface immediately, and that's when they would begin firing on and battling this beast. The fight would rage on for several minutes as this fearsome monster continuously attacked their sub. Eventually, using artillery, they would wound the beast. It would finally swim away. He figured the beast to be 100 feet in length. This encounter at sea would be one of the most mysterious of all time. Follow from archaeologists break silence on what's in the chambers below the Sphinx and the Pyramid of Giza. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed in Egypt in 1978. Mapping an extraordinary subterranean complex beneath the Egyptian pyramids. Arrangements would be made with then-President Sadat of Egypt. This would result in over 3 decades of top-secret excavations attempting to penetrate the system. At a meeting in Australia in the 90s, one of the key scientists on the Giza project, Dr. Jim Hurtak, would release film footage of the excavations. This footage would come to be known as Chambers of the Deep. It was supposed to be released at the end of the 20th century, but of course it wasn't, and still hasn't been released to this day. The film would reveal a vast megalithic metropolis, reaching several levels below the Giza Plateau. This would be called the City of the Gods. The buildings matched our largest cathedrals, and the technology, just wait. They figured this civilization to be 30,000 years older than the Egyptians. As we arrived at the entrance to the chambers, Caesar would touch a triangle, and the gates, as if powered by magnetics, would slide open. We then proceeded down a tunnel towards the Sphinx when it suddenly veered off. At this point, we knew it couldn't have been built by the giants, but instead, the reptilian race, as they would find one of their skeletons down there. It was obvious there was some sort of battle there at the time, and he was left for dead. The tunnel was then sealed and its entrance hidden. We would make our way through and it opened up to a very large room. It was here we would find stacks on stacks of large metal tablets, written in an ancient language. Well, how do you read the language? I proclaimed to the lieutenant. Exactly. We couldn't figure it out. We figured there should be some machine that would read it for you, until a scientist would press vertically on one. That's when, at ground level in front of the tablet, a hologram projected. The hologram would sit quite high off the ground and display a corner of the universe. It was very detailed and showed the process and the rotation of a star cloud. Me and the others would sit there and watch it for 2 hours. It was recorded as if they put a camera in the universe for 100,000 years and played it back in high speed. America would have needed more than a year to process and release the information to the public. You could easily have sat there and watched that one tablet for thousands of hours. I was then taken to a different chamber, where displayed was a 2-meter high crystal. It was a perfectly carved pyramid with several faces. This crystal was so beautiful and pure, you could almost see right through it to the wall. The lieutenant looked at me and said, "I left this discovery for the end on purpose. And you should know that I never knew about the crystal either. And it wasn't until I connected it to the other machine that a space-time distortion was activated. This device can project you in time. You can't interact because your body stays here." Astounded, I gulped nervously. Then I asked the question that I had been too nervous to ask the entire time. "Tell me, Lieutenant, those who built this place, did they come from outer space?" There was a brief moment of silence. Then Caesar looked me straight in the eyes. "I can tell you they're a very advanced civilization that want to help humans very much."